Hello, 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 nonprofit leaders. Sarah Olivieri here. And today we're going to be talking about boards. You all have them. You don't all love them. Some of you do. But we're going to be talking, for those of you who have them but don't love them, overcoming board dysfunction. I was just on a call with someone the other day where they had this challenge where the board keeps kind of stepping in and honestly slowing things down. And this happens a lot. So I'm going to give you 3 tips for, kind of the key things that I think are the things you need to do to build and design your board so that it functions really well and everybody is happy to be there. So the first thing, and probably the most important thing, is many of our boards are following a model of board leadership that is broken. And if your board or you and your board believe that the board's job is to provide governance, which many of us have heard, then you, in fact, are using this ineffective, broken system. So let me break it down for you. All nonprofits need good governance. Good governance consists of making decisions, a leadership at some point that is making decisions, and another form of leadership that is double checking or overseeing the decisions. So if your board is making the decisions, and since there is no board, there's no real board police, there's no board oversight above the board, there's only their ability to keep themselves in check, then you don't have good governance because the board is essentially overseeing their own decisions. What we need to have good governance is a model that separates decision-making from decision-making oversight. So rather than use a governance model for your board, the fix to having a highly functional board is to have an oversight model for your board, meaning the staff and the leadership team and the staff with a whole system, not just one person acting as the supreme ruler, are going to make the decisions. And the board is going to oversee those decisions, meaning they're going to double check them. They're going to look for red flags. They're going to be on the lookout for anything that is illegal, grossly ineffective, or unethical. Those are the things, and that oversight model, 1, is a lot easier. 2 is finally clear, right? Because you've probably all heard boards shouldn't get in the weeds, or they should manage but not micromanage. But really, there is no clear line between managing and micromanaging. We know when we're way on the side of micromanaging, but there is no clear line in the sand between the two. But there is a clear line between making decisions and double checking decisions. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do is switch your leadership model, your operational model for your boards from a governance model to an oversight model. If you want to go deeper on this topic, there's a great article by Bridgespan you can Google. If you want to also learn more about what an oversight model looks like, I'll put a link to a training that I have for boards in the comments. But that's step 1. The next thing is to always be leveling up and maintaining the knowledge of your board. So they need to understand how this oversight model works, and they also need to understand what they are overseeing at your nonprofit. If in order to double check, you have to go and look, and you have to look somewhat closely, and you need to know what to look at. So I want you to think, if you're a board, that part of your job is to always be learning about what's going on in your organization. And if we want to break that into a few broad categories that you could potentially set up even as your board committees, these are the committees I recommend, is you should be looking at leadership overall, like what are the leadership systems and processes? Who are the leaders? Are there enough leaders? Are they qualified? Are they sufficiently resourced? You're not going to decide who all the leaders are, although you may actually decide who the executive director or CEO is, because somebody does have to decide that. And I go more into that in that board's training. But you're going to be checking, right? Double checking. Are we compensating fairly and sufficiently to retain staff? Are we providing resources? Do we have enough staff? Too many or too few? Typically, it's too few. That's a chance for your organization, right? So looking at all things leadership, both people and processes. Do we have, and for a lot of you thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, you might be asking questions around, is our leadership diverse? Do we have easy paths for people from all different backgrounds to come into decision-making positions amongst our leadership? Leadership systems, is our system prone to inheriting systemic biases and inequities, or is it kind of resistant? Does it kind of help counterbalance the systemic biases and inequities that are all around us? Then, in addition to thinking about leadership, I'd be thinking about impact, right? So this is going to be things around, are we making an impact towards our mission? What can we check around that? Things to check around that are strategy. Do we have a written strategy? What are the goals? What are the tactics? Do they make sense? Do the tactics make sense for achieving the goals? Do they seem like they're kind of balanced with the resources? Does the financial plan make sense? It can be helpful to break out a separate finance committee that looks at some of the more particulars of the finances, like double checking, for anything illegal or grossly ineffective, because it takes extra training and learning to be good at reading financial documents. So those are kind of the 3 standing committees that I recommend boards have around learning and always being in the know about what's happening at their nonprofits, at their organizations. So a leadership committee, and also you can look at leadership at the board level as well in that committee. A finance committee for those who have gotten some better at actually looking at, financial spreadsheets, cash flow projections, profit and loss statements, or income and expense statements, as we often call them in the nonprofit space, and an impact committee. All right, so let's move on to my third tip for you in overcoming dysfunction and having a board that truly everybody loves to be a part of. And that's make the experience of being on the board fun and rewarding. So we want to be having a great group experience. We want board members who are all rowing in the same direction, who feel like they have a good time together doing this important, but sometimes unglamorous work. So that means things like don't meet too frequently, right? Probably every month is way too much. I recommend somewhere between every other month. So 6 times a year or 4 times a year is probably plenty. And then make sure you have a strong facilitator for your meetings, right? And the facilitator doesn't have to be the board chair. It can be anybody who's a good facilitator. A good facilitator keeps the agenda on track. It helps balance the conversation so that those who maybe need a little more coaxing or opening of the room to make sure their voice is heard comes out, or those who tend to be more talkative have the opportunity to express what they're thinking, but don't necessarily take over the conversation. It means beginning and ending on time, bringing people together to get focused. Also things like, if you decide, be intentional about how many in-person meetings, how many Zoom meetings, what's the right balance for people. In-person meetings are great for bonding, but not all the meetings need to be about bonding. And sometimes just getting the work done without pulling everybody away from their families or their jobs is really of value as well. And then two more things related to making it a fun, enjoyable group experience is be mindful of how you bring new members in. So one, this means as new board members join, really make sure that they are welcomed, mentored, and guided through the process. And related to this, one thing many of our clients in the Thrive programs have been implementing this year are onboarding processes where there's really intentional education, but then the kind of final moment at which you officially become a permanent board member, or for you achieve your permanent term, not your permanent term, but you're actually in your term, your first term, that you actually have to complete the onboarding and then kind of be like confirmed, or that, there's different ones have chosen different processes here, but that we don't then bring a new board member on who's kind of somewhat unknown entity and then we onboard them. We essentially provisionally invite them, and then they get onboarded and trained and get a chance to participate and kind of feel out belonging, in the group. And then they officially begin their term. And this really helps great fit board members feel really good about their experience. I remember when I first, some boards that I've joined, and you're in that moment like, should I say something? Is it like not cool with the culture if I speak up in my first meeting? or do they want me to participate? Am I going to get dinged if I don't? Like, what's the expectations here? Right. So we get really clear expectations. And for those members who we thought might be great, but ended up maybe not being the best fit once they got into it, now we're not like married to them and having to negotiate a board member divorce, if you all know what I mean. We've just tested the waters and agreed actually it's probably not the best fit after all. And finally, not a tip, but going back to my first tip, when we use this oversight model over the governance model, where the board, in oversight, the board is playing a key role to make sure the organization has good governance, whereas the governance model, we're just kind of saying the board is the governance. Then there's less work for the board, and there's less tendency for the board to make the work harder for the staff. And also there's less pressure on the board, because really there's a lot of pressure when you need to make decisions for the well-being of an organization that you're not involved with on the day-to-day. You really don't have enough data, enough resources to be making those decisions. So either you're potentially going to make bad decisions, or even if you're very experienced and very trained, right? No amount of training and experience can make up for being fully informed. And even, so you might make bad decisions, and you're also going to feel this weight and this tension and this anxiety around having to make decisions that you don't really have the best information to be giving, making those decisions on. And so it brings a lot of relief to board members who adopt an oversight model. So that frees up some time, and it makes the expectations of board members kind of realistically meet their mental, physical time availability. That's all I have for you today. In case you're tuning in and you don't know me, I'm Sarah Olivieri. I've been an executive director. I've founded a nonprofit. I've been the first executive director of a foundation. I've been the secret toilet fixer. I've been board member, both as a representative from staff as well as independent board member in multiple organizations. And it has been my true honor and pleasure to be a consultant, coach, and trainer to nonprofit leaders for quite a while now. And you hear me talking about my clients and you want to be in the room, going through an experience, getting help step by step. That's what we do in the Thrive program. And you can learn more about it and find out if you're a great fit by going to pivotground.com/application. Or if you'd like to receive tips like these in your inbox or notifications about podcast episodes that are coming out. I'm also the host of the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership Podcast. You can go to pivotground.com/sign up and get a weekly tips email as well as announcements about other trainings and such coming up. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And I will see you next week. Bye-bye.